What do you do when your wife flies to Miami with her lover just to test your jealousy and comes home to a husband who has finished playing games? How far can a calm man go, using only the law and quiet planning, while everyone around him still calls him the problem? Why does the first real consequence arrive only when she feels safest and most untouchable? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Eliot Grange, and for a long time I believed that a quiet life and a steady routine would be enough to keep our marriage safe, even when small cracks started to appear in places I did not want to inspect too closely. I noticed those cracks first in the kitchen, early mornings when I cooked eggs and made coffee while Sienna sat at the table with her phone in her hand, smiling in a way that did not include me, her thumb moving so fast across the screen that the smell of coffee felt less real than whatever she was reading. When I asked who she was talking to, I kept my tone light and casual, but inside I watched carefully as she rolled her eyes and told me it was just the group, just friends from work, just harmless chatter, and she made it sound as if my simple curiosity was strange and heavy. I was not the kind of man who grabbed phones or shouted in kitchens, so I let her word harmless hang between us like a thin curtain, pretending I could not see the shadow of something larger behind it. At night in our bedroom, the light from her screen painted cold rectangles on the wall while she lay with her back turned to me, her phone half hidden under her pillow, the soft clicking of her fingers, the last sound before sleep, not my voice or even silence. One night I turned slightly and saw a name flash at the top of her screen, just long enough for my brain to grab it before she tapped the notification away. It said Brandon, and I remembered how she once mentioned a trainer from Miami in passing, almost too casually, like she wanted me to think he was unimportant. I did not say anything then, because my habit was always to stay calm and watch, to collect details before I made any move, so I stored that name in the same place where I kept important passwords, license renewal dates, and our daughter's school schedule. During a Sunday call on speakerphone with her mother, I heard them talk about me as if I were a character in a story they had already decided, Sienna saying that I was too serious, too careful, too slow, while Donna laughed and told her that some men needed a little shock to remember that their wives were still young. I did not argue or walk out. I stood at the sink washing dishes, feeling the warm water over my hands while I memorized the day, the time, and the exact tone in their voices, because my mind always tries to place events in order, even when my heart wants to leave the room. That evening, my mother called and asked gently if everything felt peaceful at home, and I told her that things were tense but manageable, that I was taking notes in my head instead of starting fights I could not control, and she said that writing things down, even privately, was sometimes safer than speaking them out loud. A few days later, I saw that Sienna's phone now had several new calendar reminders, bright little blocks across the screen, and one of them caught my eye because it did not look like a normal work event. It simply said Harbor 7:40 p.m., and when she noticed my glance, she dismissed it with a swipe so fast that the air between us felt suddenly sharp. I did not ask why she needed to be at a harbor in the evening, or who would be there, or why she had told me that that night would be girls' drinks in town, because every word from my mouth was being weighed and twisted already, and I knew I had more to learn before I spoke clearly. That night I stepped out onto the balcony while she stayed in the bedroom, and the city lights below looked like another kind of screen, full of bright points that meant nothing without context. Just like the phone in her hand, just like the laughter I heard through the wall when she sent voice messages to someone who was not me. My own phone buzzed once in my pocket as I stood by the railing, and I saw a notification from my email that had turned into a calendar reminder without me remembering setting it. It was titled, Meeting, Personal, Downtown, 4:25 p.m., and I stared at the small block of text for a long moment, thinking about how even the quietest steps begin with a line on a calendar before anyone hears them. The first time I understood that the situation had moved beyond our kitchen walls was on an ordinary workday, when I walked into the open-plan office and felt a different kind of attention on me. Something sharper than usual curiosity, something that made the air around my desk feel crowded even before anyone said a word. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started working through support tickets, but my coworker Liam rolled his chair over with a grin that felt too wide, holding his phone out as if he were offering me a piece of cake, not a small bomb. On his screen I saw Sienna in a rooftop pool, the Miami skyline behind her, a bright drink in her hand and water beating on her shoulders, and next to her stood Brandon, close enough that their arms touched, his smile a little too proud, his body turned toward her as if the whole world were a background. Liam told me that my wife had serious vacation energy, and he asked if I was enjoying the peace at home, and I heard a few coworkers nearby laugh in that awkward way people laugh when they think a situation is funny but also dangerous. Sienna had told me it was a girls' trip, that she needed time to feel alive, that I should be happy for her because life was short. And I had nodded slowly, thinking of luggage weight, airport transfers, and our daughter's school schedule, because my mind always moves to logistics first. Now, seeing Brandon's arm resting along the edge of the pool behind her bare shoulders, I realized that the word girls in her description had been more flexible in her mouth than in mine, and that I had been included in this game only as the distant, serious husband people would laugh about. I kept my voice even and told Liam that she liked to travel and that I hoped the weather was good, which seemed to surprise him because he expected anger or denial, not my quiet tone and careful phrasing. When he rolled back to his desk, I opened a spreadsheet on my screen and entered today's date, the location tag visible in the corner of the photo, and a brief note about who else appeared in the frame. Then I minimized the window when my manager walked by, leaving only an ordinary help desk ticket visible. In the office kitchen later, I heard two colleagues talking about Sienna's latest story, something about a club dance floor and a caption where she joked about making him sweat at home, and one of them wondered out loud if I felt threatened or if we had some open agreement, as if they were reviewing a show and I was just another viewer. I rinsed my mug, thanked them for sending the file I needed, and walked out without reacting, because every reaction would become part of the entertainment for them, while my silence remained mine alone. That evening, our team went to a rooftop bar in our own city for a birthday, and someone cast a story from Sienna's trip up onto the big screen behind the bar. Just for fun, just for laughs, they said. A video where she walked along a bright Miami promenade at sunset, while Brandon looped an arm around her waist for the camera. The caption across the video said something about a jealousy test, and I watched in the dim light as my coworkers glanced at me, trying to read my face while pretending not to stare. And I understood that my marriage had become a running joke in a room full of people who were not there when we said our vows. I stepped away from the group and leaned on a rail near the edge of the rooftop. The city spread out below while my phone vibrated again in my pocket. And this time it was a notification from a message thread I had created the night before, named simply Follow Up. I opened it and typed a short, clear description of what I had just seen. Rooftop Miami video, promenade, Brandon's arm around her waist, jealousy caption, coworkers watching, and then I attached the autosave story before the platform deleted it, making sure the date and time were visible on the small preview. When I slid my phone back into my pocket, one of my colleagues came over and tried to joke that I must be dying of jealousy, that my boring life could not compete with beaches and parties, and he asked if I was worried she would not come back. I answered indirectly, saying that some people believe jealousy proves love, while other people believe respect proves it, and that I knew which side I was on. And he looked at me strangely because my words did not match the script he expected. The night finally moved on, and I pretended to enjoy the conversation about projects and deadlines, but the air around me felt thinner, as if something important had already left. On the way home, I checked my phone again and saw a new notification at the top of the screen that did not come from Sienna, not from my family, not even from the airline she had used. It was a group chat from work, buzzing with messages, and at the center of it was an image someone had quickly made. They had taken a screenshot of Sienna and Brandon in the pool, added an exaggerated caption about training her husband's jealousy muscles, and tagged my name under it with laughing emojis. And as I stared at that small image on my screen, feeling the train sway beneath my feet, I understood that the joke had grown beyond our home, and was now a story everyone thought they owned, but only I would have to live through. Sienna came back from Miami 2 days after that rooftop bar outing, and I met her at our apartment door with Mia pressed against my leg, our daughter bouncing slightly with excitement, while Sienna rolled her suitcase down the hallway as if she were returning from a work conference. Not from a trip that had turned my life into a joke. She hugged Mia first, lifting her up and spinning her in the small entryway, then gave me a quick, cool kiss on the cheek that tasted more like airport air and hotel soap than like home, and when I asked if the trip went well, she said it was amazing. Freeing, exactly what she needed. She used phrases like, I feel alive again, and I needed to remember I'm still young. And when I mentioned that my coworkers had seen some of her posts, she laughed and said that people who were upset by vacation photos needed to grow up and stop acting like the world started and ended with their marriage. I did not ask why Brandon was in so many of the pictures, because I already knew what she would say. And I was tired of hearing the same thin excuses wrapped in different words. So instead, I focused on Mia's homework schedule and the groceries we needed. The next afternoon, we went to the supermarket together because the fridge was nearly empty, and for a moment, the fluorescent lights and long aisles let me pretend we were just another tired couple restocking for the week, until the cashier broke that illusion with one careless sentence. As we loaded items on the belt, the cashier smiled at Sienna and asked if the birthday boy in Miami had treated her well, winking in a way that made my stomach drop, and Sienna laughed loudly, saying she had had the time of her life and that some experiences could not be explained to serious people. The cashier glanced at me, realized who I must be, and her smile faltered. But Sienna just continued, saying that I was still processing and that I would eventually understand that jealousy meant I still cared. I slid our joint card toward the reader, then paused, pulled it back, and instead used my personal card, telling the cashier that we were updating some accounts and that it was easier this way, while Sienna frowned as if I had disrupted a script she had rehearsed. On the drive home, she joked that I was punishing her with budget control because I could not handle a few pool photos, but I simply said we needed clearer lines around spending, especially when travel was involved, and I kept my eyes on the road. Later that week, we had a family dinner at a noisy restaurant for Ray's birthday, the kind of place with a long table reserved at the back and bright decorations that tried to shout over the clatter of dishes and children's voices, and I went because I did not want to give anyone another reason to call me distant. Sienna arrived dressed as if she were still in Miami, bright colors and a low neckline, and Kara waved her over with the energy of someone who had been waiting to hear more stories, her phone already on the table near her elbow. As soon as drinks arrived, someone asked how the trip went, and that was all Sienna needed. She began retelling every moment, adding details she had never mentioned to me, making Brandon seem funnier, more spontaneous, more attentive, while describing me as the quiet man who stayed home with spreadsheets and bedtime routines. She said she had gone to Miami partly to test whether her husband still felt anything, and she laughed that I must have burned with jealousy at home while she danced on rooftops and walked along the promenade with someone who knew how to enjoy life. The table laughed in waves, some people out of discomfort, others out of genuine amusement, and Donna raised a glass, saying that a man who wanted to keep a woman like Sienna had to be ready for competition, as if marriage were a game show with contestants lined up. I sat there with my hands wrapped around my glass, feeling the condensation slide down my fingers, and when Kara lifted her phone to capture the vibes, pointing the camera down the table, I saw the small red recording dot at the top of her screen and felt a quiet click in my mind. I did not interrupt, did not bang the table, or demand that they stop laughing, because I understood that every word spoken that night, every joke, every description of the jealousy test, was more than just humiliation. It was also a record waiting to be preserved by someone with a steady hand. At one point, Ray tried to change the subject, asking about Mia's school projects, but Sienna steered the conversation back, saying that children needed parents who were not boring, and Donna repeated it like a line she wanted everyone to remember. After cake and forced smiles, we finally went home. And once the apartment grew quiet, I moved to the corner of our living room where my laptop sat on a small desk, a space that had started as a work-from-home station and had slowly become something more. I took the stack of envelopes from my briefcase and separated them into neat piles, then filled 3 labeled binders: household, utilities, and bank, writing the titles in clear block letters, the way my mother had taught me when I was a teenager organizing school papers. The utilities binder grew thicker quickly, not just with bills, but with printed bank statements that showed travel expenses, hotel payments, and unusual charges from before and during the Miami trip, each one slipped into a plastic sleeve without any angry notes scribbled in the margins. I turned on the printer and sent a test page, watching it whir and spit out a blank sheet before I calibrated the scanner, making sure it captured documents cleanly, not because I knew exactly when I would need those images, but because I could feel that the day would come. When the scans were done, a small notification appeared in the corner of my laptop screen, a quiet message that said, "File uploaded successfully," and I checked both cloud folders I had created earlier, Archive A and Archive B, confirming that duplicates now existed in more than one place. The sound of the television from the bedroom drifted down the hallway while I worked, some loud show Sienna liked, full of people shouting over each other about betrayal and loyalty, and I wondered briefly if she saw herself in any of them. Before going to bed, I took out my phone and opened the social media app again, moving to Kara's profile, where I suspected she would have posted from the restaurant. Sure enough, there was a new story. A wide shot of the table, Sienna at the center, her hands moving as she described her jealousy test. The subtitle Kara had added reading, "He will never leave, he's too scared," with a laughing emoji on the side. My thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed the small save icon, storing the video in a place Sienna could not edit or delete, and as I watched the progress circle complete, I understood that every time they laughed and pressed record, they were also placing another piece into my quiet, growing puzzle. A few days after the restaurant dinner, I took Mia to the neighborhood park on a bright Saturday afternoon, hoping that the simple rhythm of swings and slides would soften the tension that had settled over our apartment like dust. The park was crowded with children chasing each other across the grass, their shouts mixing with the bark of dogs and the occasional rumble of buses on the nearby street, and for a short time I let myself enjoy the simple sight of Mia pumping her legs on the swing, her hair flying back, her face open and unguarded. When she finally slowed down and asked to sit on the bench with me, she climbed onto my lap and leaned her head against my chest, and I thought maybe the afternoon would remain peaceful. Then she lifted her head and asked, in a small voice that still cut like a knife, why Mommy was hugging the pool man more than me in the pictures on Aunt Kara's phone. She described one image clearly, even though she had only seen it briefly. Mommy in the water. The man behind her with his arms on the edge, smiling down, and Mia said it looked like the way parents hold each other in the movies. I took a slow breath and told her that sometimes grown-ups make wrong choices and take pictures that hurt people they love, and that those choices were not her fault, and that whatever happened between me and her mother, I would still be her father every single day. She frowned, thinking hard in that way children do when they meet a new truth, and asked if we were going to stop being a family, and I answered as honestly as I could without making promises I might not be able to keep, telling her that families can change shape, but that love does not have to disappear. As we sat there, I noticed two other parents at a nearby bench glancing over more than once, their voices dropping whenever they said the word Miami, and I knew that rumors had spread beyond coworkers and relatives into the quiet corners of our daily life. Later that week, at the school pickup line, the air felt thick with unspoken knowledge as parents waited for their children behind a low fence, small groups forming and dissolving like clouds. I stood slightly apart, hands in my jacket pockets, listening without appearing to listen as two mothers behind me whispered about a woman who had gone on a jealousy trip with another man, one of them wondering if the husband was really as controlling as the story made him sound. When Mia came out of the building, she ran straight to me, and one of the mothers gave me a quick, embarrassed nod, as if she had only just realized that the story she had repeated belonged to a real person standing a few meters away. On the walk home, Mia asked again why people kept talking about Mommy's trip, and I told her that adults sometimes enjoy gossiping and that it was not her job to fix any of it, and that her job was to be a child, to play and learn and tell me whenever something she heard made her feel strange. That evening, back at the apartment, Sienna burst into the kitchen with her phone in hand, her expression sharp, accusing me of turning people against her, saying she knew I had been talking to my mother and probably to my coworkers too. I answered calmly that I had not told anyone anything they could not already see for themselves online, and that if she did not want people to talk, she could stop giving them new material. She called me manipulative and cold, said I was acting like a victim to gain sympathy, and threatened to take Mia and move out if I kept poisoning the atmosphere, as if my quiet presence and steady voice were more dangerous than her public stories. I did not rise to the threat, but I let the words sink in, storing them beside the dates and images already lined up in my mind, and I told her that Mia needed stability more than drama, which only made her more furious. That night, I moved a pillow and blanket into the guest bedroom, telling Mia the next morning that Daddy had been snoring too loudly and needed his own bed for a while, turning a painful adjustment into a practical explanation she could accept. As I did, I slid a locked drawer closed with a soft click, a drawer where I had begun placing important items, a small notebook with dates and short descriptions, a few printed photographs, and a single USB drive that contained mirrored copies of certain files from Archive A and Archive B. In the hallway closet, high above where Mia could reach, I had taped another USB drive under a folder labeled Taxes, the kind of hiding place I would remember even years from now, because my nature is to prepare for the day when memory alone is not enough. One evening, when Sienna went out for drinks with friends from the gym, I stood in front of our kitchen cabinets and placed a yellow sticky note inside one of the doors, hidden beside the mugs, with 2 words on it, bring forms. It was a reminder for myself, not for her. A small anchor for a future day I could feel approaching, even if I could not see its full shape yet. On my phone, I checked the cloud folders again and saw another quiet message saying, "File uploaded successfully." And I scrolled through thumbnails of videos showing laughing faces at the restaurant, poolside jokes, and captions about jealousy, each one now detached from its original setting and stored in my growing, silent archive. The true fracture, however, became clear a few days later during a tense Sunday lunch at our apartment, when Donna and Ray came over because Donna insisted we clear the air for Mia's sake. We sat at the table with plates of food that no one really tasted, and Donna said I needed to stop making Sienna feel judged, that men who loved their wives supported them even when they needed to act out a little, and that I was turning this into something bigger than it needed to be. I replied in an even tone that flying to Miami with another man and using our marriage as a public test was not acting out. It was a choice with consequences, especially for a child old enough to notice. Sienna glared at me and said I was making Mia anxious on purpose, that I was planting ideas in her head, and Donna nodded along, insisting that children only worry when adults feed them stories. As if on cue, Mia walked into the kitchen holding a drawing and climbed onto a chair, eyes moving from me to her mother and back again, and she asked if we were going to live in different houses now, like one of her classmates whose parents had separated. Donna froze, looked at me as if waiting for me to deny everything, and then quickly told Mia not to be dramatic, saying that nobody was making her choose sides, that Grandma would not take sides either because adults knew how to handle things. There was a long silence after that, broken only by the small hum of the refrigerator, and I felt something settle firmly inside me, a decision that had been forming for weeks finally reaching its final shape. I told Mia gently that grown-ups were having serious talks and that no matter what happened, I would always be there for her. And then I asked her to take her drawing to her room and add more colors so she could show me later. When she left, I took out my phone under the table and opened the same follow-up thread I had used before, typing a short note about what had been said. Child asking about different houses, grandmother saying she would not take sides, mother accusing me of planting ideas. I saved it, then immediately deleted the preview from my screen so that anyone glancing over would see nothing but a blank lock screen. And as the message synced quietly in the background, I realized that the family had already split into camps, whether they wanted to admit it or not, and that the next steps would not be taken in this kitchen but somewhere far more official. After that Sunday lunch, I moved through my days with a different kind of stillness, as if something inside me had clicked into its final position, and now every motion followed a quiet plan I did not need to announce. At work, I booked a short meeting with HR, framing it as a general inquiry about benefits and future planning. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would sound like an alarm, just a careful man trying to understand the systems around him. In the small HR room, the representative explained how housing allowances might work if family circumstances changed, how health coverage applied to dependents, how parental schedules could be adjusted if living arrangements shifted, and I listened with my usual patient focus, writing short, clear notes on a small pad I had brought from home. I did not say the word divorce, did not talk about affairs or jealousy tests, only use phrases like possible changes and stability for my child, and the HR representative answered in the same neutral language, unaware of the Miami pool, the rooftop videos, or the restaurant jokes. After the meeting, I walked down into the underground parking garage beneath our office tower, a cool, echoing space that always felt separate from whatever chaos sat above it, and I sat inside my car with the engine off, the only sound the distant hum of ventilation fans. I put on my headphones and opened the contact in my phone that I had renamed with a simple scale emoji, then listened as a calm voice went over possible legal steps, the kind that did not depend on anger, but on documented patterns and clear timelines. The voice described how a petition could mention public humiliation, travel expenses tied to a partner, social media posts used as proof of ongoing conduct, and how temporary orders could protect a child's routine and housing while the process moved forward. I said very little, mostly confirmed dates and details, answered questions about income and savings, and when the call ended, I wrote down a specific day and time on the notepad, circling them once instead of underlining them, because I did not feel like shouting even on paper. That night, back at home, I sat at the small desk in our living room and opened several browser tabs, each one practical and bland. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me, nothing that would look dramatic to someone glancing over my shoulder, but each one connected to the quiet structure I was building. I downloaded bank statements that covered the weeks before and after the Miami trip, highlighting in my mind the hotel charges, flight payments, and unusual transfers, then printed parts of them with only the word statement visible at the top of each page, avoiding any loud labels that would invite confrontation before I was ready. I slipped those pages into the thickening utilities binder, which now looked too heavy for its name, a quiet weight on the shelf beside household and bank, and each plastic sleeve whispered softly as I turned it, a small sound that felt more honest than the words coming from Sienna's mouth these days. While I worked, Sienna moved around the apartment with restless energy, sometimes humming along to a song on her phone, sometimes pacing while she sent voice messages to people who always seemed to be on her side. She had started talking more loudly about leaving, saying to friends over calls that she might move out with Mia, that she was tired of living with a man who made her feel judged, and she spoke in such a way that if anyone heard only her side, they would think I was the one trying to control and limit her. When she confronted me about the joint account one evening in the kitchen, her voice sharp and injured, she said she had tried to pay for something and found the card declined, and she accused me of punishing her like a child. I explained calmly that I had moved most everyday expenses to my personal account because I needed clarity and structure, that shared money should not fund trips meant to test my jealousy, and that I would still cover everything Mia needed without fail. She said I was acting like a banker instead of a husband, that I was building walls between us, and she threw out the phrase that I would never survive alone because I depended on her social energy and her connections. I let her talk, allowed her to build the story in her own mind, then told her in a level voice that I was done with games and that from now on I would handle everything properly, step by step, through the channels that existed for a reason. The words properly and channels seemed to unsettle her more than any accusation would have, because they did not fit the pattern of tears and shouting she understood. Instead, they pointed toward a process she could not fully see or control. She stormed out of the kitchen, saying she would go to her mother's if I kept acting like a judge, and the front door banged just hard enough to rattle a picture frame on the hallway wall. I stayed where I was, resting my hand lightly on the counter, and then felt my phone vibrate near the fruit bowl. I picked it up and saw an alarm I had set days ago slide onto the screen, silent except for the buzz, labeled with 2 simple words, paper drop. I watched the small text for a moment, then tapped to dismiss it. Not because the task no longer mattered, but because I understood that the papers would not drop today, not yet, but soon enough, in a place where doors did not slam and laughter did not decide what was real. The day those papers finally stepped out of my plans and into the light began quietly, with the ordinary routine of the school pickup line and the soft weight of Mia's backpack against my leg. That morning, I had taken extra care with simple things, packing Mia's lunch, checking her homework, making sure her favorite book was in her bag, because I knew that whatever else happened later, I wanted this part of her day to feel solid and familiar. At the school gates, I stood in the usual line of parents while children spilled out in bursts of color and noise, and I listened as one father nearby commented on the weather, completely unaware that I was counting the hours to a very different kind of conversation. When Mia saw me, she ran over with the same small smile she always had on pickup days, and as I buckled her into the car, I told her, in simple, steady words, that later I would have to meet her mother and grandparents to talk about adult papers. I explained that those papers would not change the fact that she had her room, her school, her routines, and that I would still be the one making sure she had breakfast on school mornings and help with projects at night. She looked at me with serious eyes, asked if we were angry, and I said that we were not shouting, we were deciding, and that my job was to protect her calm. After dropping her off with my mother, who had agreed to keep her for the afternoon, I drove downtown, the city passing by in long, gray streaks that matched the way my thoughts moved. Not fast, but steady, one clear line after another. The courthouse lobby was larger than I expected, with high ceilings that made every sound echo, and a steady flow of people walking through security, each with their own important bundle of worries pressed under one arm. I arrived early, as I always do, and waited near a pillar to the side, holding a folded jacket over one arm while people moved around me like a slow tide. The process server, a man with a calm face and a stack of folders in his bag, approached me, confirmed my name, and quietly checked a few details we had already gone over through that contact on my phone marked with the small-scale emoji. He had already seen scans of the binders I had built, the screenshots of Miami posts, the videos from the restaurant where my marriage was turned into a punchline, and the notes from my small pad where I had written down Mia's questions and my in-laws' reactions. The petition in his folder carried all of that in condensed form, not as drama, but as dates, times, and events, each one stripped of jokes and sharpened into a simple point. Inside that same folder sat a request for temporary financial and possession orders, drawn so that I would remain in the apartment with Mia as her primary residence while the case moved forward, citing stability, school distance, and the pattern of behavior that had made our home so unsteady. When Sienna arrived, she did not come alone. Donna walked beside her with a determined expression, and Ray followed a step behind, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if he already knew this would not be the kind of meeting Donna expected. They looked around for me, expecting, I think, to find me already explaining myself, already on the defensive, ready to bargain and reassure. But I stayed by the pillar until the process server gave me a small nod. He stepped away from me and toward them, his voice firm but not loud as he addressed Sienna by her full legal name, and for a moment I saw confusion on her face, followed by a flash of recognition as she understood what a stranger using that tone and that name usually meant in a place like this. He handed her the envelope in a practiced motion, explaining in neutral, rehearsed phrases that she was being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage and temporary orders regarding property and custody. Donna reacted first, her voice rising as she demanded to know what this was, saying that this could not be serious, that I was ambushing her daughter and destroying the family over some pictures, and a few people in the lobby turned their heads at the sharpness of her words. Ray placed a hand on her arm, urging her to sit on one of the benches, and then he leaned over Sienna's shoulder as she opened the envelope with shaking fingers. I watched from a short distance as her eyes moved across the first page, taking in phrases that did not use the language of jealousy games or freedom, but instead spoke of conduct, of public displays with a named individual, of documented trips, of online posts that framed her husband as a controlling problem while inviting laughter at his expense. The petition's attached timeline mentioned the Miami dates, the rooftop bar videos, the restaurant recording where she called the trip a test and said I would never leave, the school pickup days when Mia asked about the pool man, and the way Sienna threatened to move our daughter out of the home when I tried to draw boundaries. Another section outlined the financial situation in clean lines, showing the joint funds used for travel with Brandon, the recent closing of certain shared accounts, and the plan for temporary support that ensured Mia's needs were covered without leaving my housing dependent on Sienna's mood or public image. The temporary orders requested that I remain in the apartment with Mia as her main residence until the court made a final decision, citing my steady work schedule, my consistent presence at school pickups, and the records of nights when Sienna stayed out for long hours while I was the one putting Mia to bed. Donna tried to argue with the paper itself, saying that the stories were being twisted, that Sienna had only been trying to feel alive, that the court would understand a little acting out. But the words on the page did not answer her. They only sat there, firm and dry, listing what had happened without adjectives. Sienna looked up at me with a mixture of shock and fury, asking in a strangled voice how I could do this to her, how I could make her look like the problem, and whether I had planned this the whole time while pretending to be calm. I did not move closer, did not try to comfort or provoke her. I simply said, in the level tone I had used for months, that I had not made her look like anything, that I had written down what was already visible, and that I was done being the punchline of her jealousy tests. I added that from this point on, everything would go through the proper channels, that I would follow whatever schedule the court set for Mia, and that I would not argue with her in lobbies, restaurants, or comment sections. Donna began to say that no judge would believe I was the better parent, but Ray interrupted her quietly, pointing out that the petition mentioned not just posts and trips, but also school routines and who had been present at conferences and doctor visits. And his eyes met mine for a brief moment, full of something closer to understanding than anger. I felt a presence beside me and turned to see my mother standing near the entrance to the lobby, her posture straight but her face soft, and I realized she had arrived a little early and had watched the last part of the scene from a respectful distance. I walked toward her slowly, the sounds of raised voices and shuffling papers fading behind me, and together we stepped through the courthouse doors onto the wide plaza outside, where the traffic noise quickly swallowed any echo of what had just happened inside. My mother asked in a quiet voice if everything had gone as expected, and I answered that the papers had been delivered, that temporary orders were now in place for the apartment and for Mia's schedule, and that the next steps would belong to the court, not to social media or dinner tables. I looked back once through the glass doors and saw Sienna still sitting on the bench, head bowed over the packet in her hands, Donna leaning over her, Ray standing to the side, his gaze distant. Then I turned away from the scene, feeling neither triumph nor relief, only a solid sense that the line had finally been drawn, somewhere no laughter could erase it, and I walked down the courthouse steps toward the street, where the story of my life would now continue under different rules, even if the world never bothered to watch.